The old church smelled like dust and forgotten prayers. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting colorful patterns on worn wooden pews. It was a Saturday afternoon in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, and the annual fundraiser was in full swing. Tables lined the fellowship hall, covered with homemade quilts, baked goods, and donated items that people hoped might raise a few dollars for the church roof repair. The turnout was modest, maybe 50 people wandering around, mostly older folks from the congregation and a handful of families with young children. Betty Williams sat behind a card table near the entrance, counting the small bills in the donation box. She'd been organizing these fundraisers for 20 years, and this one wasn't looking much different from the others. A few $100s if they were lucky, certainly not enough for a new roof, but every bit helped. "Where's that piano player?" Betty muttered to herself, checking her watch. Mrs. Henderson was supposed to provide some background music, maybe get people in a giving mood. But it was already 2:30 and there was no sign of her. In the corner of the hall, someone had wheeled out an old upright piano that had been gathering dust in the church basement. It was a donation from the Fletcher family, their grandmother's piano that nobody wanted anymore. The thing looked like it had seen better days. The wood was scratched and faded, and several of the keys were clearly broken. Some were missing entirely, leaving gaps like missing teeth in a smile. Among the small crowd was a woman who rarely drew much attention. Lucy Patterson worked at the town library, a quiet job that suited her perfectly. At 34, she had the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her. Not ugly, not pretty, just ordinary in every way that mattered to most people. Lucy had lived in Millfield her whole life. She rented a small apartment above the flower shop on Main Street and walked to work every morning at exactly 8:15. She ate lunch alone, usually a sandwich from home, and spent most evenings reading or watching old movies on her small television. People in town knew her, of course. She was the librarian who helped kids find books for school reports and recommended novels to the few adults who still preferred reading to scrolling on their phones. But if you asked anyone to describe Lucy Patterson, they'd probably struggle to say much beyond nice enough and keeps to herself. What nobody in Millfield knew was that Lucy had once been different. Very different. 26 years earlier, she'd been Lucy Chen, a 7-year-old who could make magic happen when she touched piano keys. Her parents had discovered her talent by accident when she wandered over to an old keyboard at a garage sale and started playing melodies she'd heard on the radio. Not just picking out the tune with one finger, but actually playing both hands, harmonies, the whole thing. Her parents, immigrants who worked double shifts at the local factory, scraped together money for lessons. Lucy's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had never seen anything like it. This quiet little girl could hear a piece of music once and play it back perfectly. More than that, she could make it better somehow, adding her own little touches that made familiar songs sound fresh and beautiful. For 3 years, Lucy lived for those piano lessons. She practiced on the old keyboard until her fingers were sore, dreaming of the day when her family might afford a real piano. Her parents talked about maybe sending her to music school someday when they saved enough money. Then her father got hurt at the factory. A back injury that meant no more work, no more steady paycheck. The piano lessons stopped first. Then they had to sell the keyboard to help pay for groceries. Lucy's musical dreams got packed away like childhood toys, something you outgrow whether you want to or not. Her family never quite recovered financially. Lucy learned to be practical instead of musical. She got good grades, went to community college, and found steady work at the library. It was a quiet life, but it was stable. Safe. The kind of life that paid the bills and didn't ask for too much hope. Now, standing in the church fellowship hall with a paper cup of weak coffee, Lucy found herself looking at that broken-down piano in the corner. A few keys were obviously stuck in the down position. Others made no sound at all when pressed. It was the kind of instrument most people would consider beyond repair. "I don't suppose anyone here plays piano," Betty Williams announced to the room, her voice carrying a note of desperation. "Mrs. Henderson can't make it today, and it would be nice to have some music." The room fell silent except for the sound of people shuffling through donated books and kitchen gadgets. A few folks glanced around hopefully, but nobody volunteered. Lucy felt something flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Her fingers tingled, remembering what it felt like to make music. She looked at that sorry excuse for a piano and found herself thinking about all the songs still trapped inside it. Even with its broken keys, that old thing probably doesn't even work, someone said with a laugh. Shame to throw it out, though, another person added. Used to be such a beautiful instrument. Lucy surprised herself by stepping forward. I could try, she said, her voice barely loud enough to hear. Betty looked up, squinting through her reading glasses. What's that, dear? I said I could try playing it. Lucy's voice was stronger this time. Just for fun, you know. See if it makes any sound. A few people gathered around as Lucy approached the piano. She could feel their eyes on her, probably wondering what the quiet librarian thought she was doing. Lucy wondered the same thing herself. She sat down on the worn bench and looked at the keyboard. Several keys in the middle were stuck down. The F sharp above middle C was missing entirely. When she pressed the G below that, nothing happened at all. It was like looking at a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But Lucy had learned to work with less than perfect situations her whole life. She flexed her fingers, feeling muscles remember movements they hadn't made in decades. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. She started with something simple. Amazing Grace, a song everyone would recognize. But as she played, something remarkable happened. Her fingers found ways around the broken keys, creating harmonies and melodies that worked with the piano's limitations instead of fighting against them. The conversations in the room gradually died away. People turned to listen. The music that came from that broken piano was unlike anything they'd ever heard. It was Amazing Grace, but somehow more beautiful than the original. Lucy's adaptations made the familiar hymn sound fresh and moving. She finished the song and looked up to find 50 pairs of eyes staring at her in complete silence. For a moment, Lucy wondered if she'd done something wrong. Then someone started clapping and suddenly the whole room erupted in applause. My goodness, Betty whispered. Where did that come from? Lucy felt her cheeks burning. She hadn't meant to cause such a reaction. She just wanted to see if the piano could make music. Now everyone was looking at her like she'd performed some kind of miracle. What Lucy didn't know was that someone in the back of the room had been recording the whole thing on their phone, thinking it might be amusing to share a video of someone trying to play a broken piano. They had no idea they were about to change one quiet librarian's life forever. The applause died down, but people kept staring at Lucy like they were seeing her for the first time. She felt her hands shaking slightly as she pulled them away from the piano keys. This wasn't supposed to happen. She just wanted to help out, maybe play a simple song to fill the silence. That was incredible, said Tom Martinez, the church's youngest deacon. He was 28 and always trying to bring new ideas to the congregation. Could you play something else? Lucy looked around the room. Everyone was waiting, watching her with expectant faces. She'd spent most of her adult life trying to blend into the background, and now she was suddenly the center of attention. I don't know, she said quietly. Maybe something classical? Without really thinking about it, her fingers found their way back to the keys. This time she started playing Chopin's Minute Waltz. It was a piece she'd learned as a child, one of the last songs her teacher had taught her before the lesson stopped. But playing it on this broken piano required something special. The missing F sharp meant she had to rethink entire sections of the melody. Where the original piece would normally soar up to those higher notes, Lucy created new paths for the music to follow. She used the bass notes more heavily, turning what was usually a light dancing piece into something deeper and more mysterious. The stuck keys became part of the rhythm. Instead of fighting them, Lucy incorporated their sustained notes into the harmony. She made the piano's limitations work for the music instead of against it. As she played, Lucy felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. It was like coming home after a long trip, or finding something precious you thought you'd lost forever. Her fingers remembered every technique her childhood teacher had shown her, but now she was adding her own ideas, her own interpretation. The room was completely silent, except for the music. Even the children had stopped running around and were standing quietly next to their parents. Mrs. Kelly, who was 93 and usually dozed through most church events, was wide awake and had tears running down her cheeks. When Lucy finished, the silence stretched for several heartbeats before the applause started again. This time it was louder, more enthusiastic. Someone whistled. A few people called out more. "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked Patricia Davis, the church organist. She'd been playing for 30 years and had never heard anything quite like what Lucy had just done. A long time ago, Lucy said, not sure how to explain. I had lessons when I was little. What she couldn't say was how it felt to touch those keys again. It was like meeting an old friend who remembered all your secrets. The music was still there inside her, waiting all these years for a chance to come out. In the back of the room, nobody noticed that Jimmy Walsh was holding up his phone. Jimmy was 16 and automatically recorded everything interesting that happened around town. He'd started filming when the lady librarian first sat down at the piano, thinking it might be funny to share a video of someone trying to play a broken instrument. But as Lucy played, Jimmy realized he was capturing something special. His hands were steady as he kept recording, and he made sure to get both Lucy's face and her fingers on the keys. The video quality was surprisingly good for a phone. Recording. The church's afternoon light created a perfect natural spotlight on the piano. Jimmy posted the video on TikTok without really thinking about it. He added a simple caption, "Lady plays broken piano at church fundraiser. This is amazing." Then he put his phone away and went back to listening. Lucy played 2 more songs, For Elise and a hymn called How Great Thou Art. Each time she found new ways to work with the piano's broken keys. She turned limitations into opportunities, creating music that was somehow more beautiful because of what was missing. By the time she finally stopped playing, the fundraiser had completely transformed. Nobody was looking at the donated items anymore. Everyone had gathered around the piano, sitting in folding chairs or standing along the walls. The afternoon had become an impromptu concert. "We should do this every year," someone said. "Every month," another person added. Lucy felt overwhelmed by all the attention. She thanked everyone and quietly slipped away, walking home to her small apartment like she did every day. But this time felt different. The music was still playing in her head, and her fingers kept moving like they were still touching piano keys. Meanwhile, Jimmy's video was starting to get noticed. It had been online for only 2 hours, but already had 300 views and dozens of comments. People were sharing it, tagging their friends, asking who this woman was. By 8 o'clock that evening, the video had 1,000 views. By midnight, it was up to 5,000. The comment section was filling up with reactions from people who couldn't believe what they were hearing. "This gave me chills," wrote one user. "How is she making a broken piano sound better than most people make a perfect one sound?" asked another. "I've been playing piano for 20 years and I've never heard anything like this," commented someone with a verified music teacher badge on their profile. The video kept spreading. People shared it on Facebook, where their parents and grandparents discovered it. Someone posted it to Reddit, where music enthusiasts began analyzing Lucy's technique. A classical music blogger wrote about it, calling it the most moving piano performance I've heard all year. Lucy had no idea any of this was happening. She didn't have social media accounts. Her phone was an old flip phone that could barely send text messages. She went to bed that Saturday night thinking about the music, remembering how good it felt to play again, but assuming that was the end of it. Sunday morning, Lucy walked to the library like always. She opened the building at 9, checked the returned books, and prepared for what she expected to be a quiet day. Sundays were usually slow, with just a few people stopping by to pick up books or use the computers. But when she unlocked the front door, she found a small crowd waiting outside. Not just the usual Sunday visitors, but people she'd never seen before. Some of them had cameras. "Are you Lucy Patterson?" asked a woman with a notebook. "The pianist from yesterday?" Lucy stared at her, confused. "I work here," she said carefully. "How can I help you?" "We saw the video," said a man with a professional-looking camera. "The one from the church. Everyone's talking about it." "What video?" That's when Lucy learned that her quiet moment at the church fundraiser had been seen by thousands of strangers. The video was spreading faster than anyone could have predicted, and people were starting to ask questions. Who was this mysterious pianist? Where had she learned to play like that? Why had nobody heard of her before? Lucy's simple life was about to become much more complicated. As she stood in the doorway of the library, looking at the reporters and curious townspeople, she had no idea that by the end of the week, millions of people across America would know her name. The music she'd kept hidden for 26 years was finally ready to be heard by the world. Lucy stood frozen in the library doorway, staring at the small crowd of strangers on the sidewalk. This had to be some kind of mistake. She was just the town librarian. Nobody famous. Nobody important. "I think you have the wrong person," she said, starting to close the door. "Wait," called out the woman with the notebook. "Are you the pianist from St. Mary's Church yesterday? The one who played the broken piano?" "I just helped out with their fundraiser," Lucy said quietly. It wasn't anything special. A young man stepped forward, holding his phone screen toward her. "Ma'am, this video has been viewed over 50,000 times since yesterday. People are calling it incredible." Lucy looked at the phone screen and saw herself sitting at that old piano. She could hear her own music playing through the tiny speaker. The video quality was better than she'd expected, and she could see why people might find it interesting. But 50,000 views? That seemed impossible. "I don't understand," she said. "It's just me playing piano." "Just you playing piano?" The reporter laughed, but not in a mean way. "Lady, music professors are sharing this video. Professional pianists are trying to figure out how you did what you did. This is going viral." The word viral meant nothing to Lucy. She'd heard people use it, but she didn't really understand what it meant. She certainly didn't understand how a simple church performance could somehow reach 50,000 people. "Could we ask you a few questions?" The woman with the notebook continued. "People want to know about your background, where you studied music, how long you've been playing professionally." "I'm not a professional," Lucy said quickly. "I work at the library. I haven't played piano in years." That answer seemed to excite the reporters even more. They started asking more questions, talking over each other. Where had she learned to play? Why had she stopped? How did she make a broken piano sound so beautiful? Lucy felt overwhelmed. All she wanted was to open the library and have a normal Sunday. Instead, she was surrounded by strangers asking about her private life. "I need to work," she said, slipping inside and locking the door behind her. But the reporters didn't leave. They stood outside, some of them making phone calls, others filming the library building. Lucy went to her desk and tried to focus on her normal Sunday routine, but she kept glancing at the windows. Around noon, her old flip phone started ringing. It was Betty Williams from the church. "Lucy, dear, you need to know what's happening," Betty said, sounding excited and worried at the same time. "That video from yesterday is all over the internet. My granddaughter showed me. Thousands and thousands of people have seen it. The reporters told me," Lucy said. "I don't understand why anyone cares." "Honey, they care because what you did was extraordinary. My granddaughter showed me some of the comments people are writing. They're saying things like, 'This moved me to tears and I've never heard anything so beautiful.'" Lucy sat down heavily in her chair. She'd just been trying to help out at a church fundraiser. How had it turned into this? "There's more," Betty continued. "My granddaughter says the video is on something called TikTok and Facebook and YouTube now too. Someone copied it and put it everywhere. She says by tomorrow maybe millions of people will see it." Millions. Lucy couldn't even imagine that many people. The entire population of her county was only about 40,000. How could millions of strangers possibly care about her playing an old broken piano? Throughout the afternoon, more people showed up at the library. Not reporters this time, but regular folks from neighboring towns who had driven over, hoping to meet the woman from the video. Some brought their children. Others asked if she would play piano for them. Lucy tried to explain that the library didn't have a piano, that she was just working, that it really wasn't a big deal. But people kept coming. By 4 o'clock, there were at least 30 people gathered on the sidewalk outside. That evening, Lucy walked home to find Mrs. Chen, her elderly neighbor, waiting by the apartment building. "Lucy," Mrs. Chen said, "my daughter called me from California. She saw a video of you playing piano. She says everyone is sharing it, talking about it. She wants to know if you're the same Lucy Chen who used to live on Maple Street when you were little." Lucy nodded slowly. Mrs. Chen had known her family before her parents moved to the other side of town. "I remember when your parents got you those piano lessons," Mrs. Chen continued. "You were so talented. Your mother was so proud. She used to tell everyone her daughter was going to be a famous musician someday." "That was a long time ago," Lucy said softly. "Maybe it's time now," Mrs. Chen said with a gentle smile. That night, Lucy couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Mrs. Chen had said, about her mother's dreams for her, about the music that had been locked away inside her for so many years. She also thought about all those people who had come to the library today. They seemed genuinely moved by her music. Some had even said it made them feel hopeful, or reminded them of their own lost dreams. Monday morning brought even bigger surprises. When Lucy arrived at the library, there were news vans parked on Main Street. Real TV crews with professional cameras and reporters she recognized from watching the evening news. Her boss, Mr. Thompson, was waiting for her inside the building. He looked overwhelmed. "Lucy, I've been getting calls all morning," he said. "People wanting to interview you." Someone from Good Morning America called. "Good Morning America, Lucy. They want you to come on their show." Lucy sat down, feeling dizzy. Good Morning America was the show her mother used to watch every day while getting ready for work. How could they possibly want to talk to a small-town librarian? "There's more," Mr. Thompson continued. "Someone from Carnegie Hall called too, and 3 different record companies. I wrote down all the messages, but Lucy, I think you need to call them back." Carnegie Hall. Lucy had dreamed about playing there when she was 8 years old. She'd seen pictures of it in her piano lesson books and imagined herself on that famous stage. But that was just a little girl's fantasy. "I don't know what to do," Lucy admitted. "Maybe start by talking to some of these reporters," Mr. Thompson suggested. "Tell your story. Let people know who you are." By noon, the video had reached over 2 million views across all platforms. Music blogs were writing articles about the mystery pianist of Ohio. Classical music websites were analyzing her technique. Social media was filled with people sharing their own stories about hidden talents and abandoned dreams. Lucy finally agreed to do one interview with the local TV station. She sat in the library, surrounded by the books she'd organized and cared for, and tried to explain how a woman who shelved romance novels and helped kids with homework had ended up at the center of a national conversation about music and dreams. "I just wanted to help out at the church," she said simply. "I never expected any of this." But as she spoke about her childhood lessons, about the dreams that got put away, about rediscovering music after so many years, Lucy began to understand what was happening. People weren't just watching a video of someone playing piano. They were seeing proof that extraordinary things could come from ordinary people. That talent doesn't disappear, even when it's hidden for decades. That it's never too late to let your gifts shine. America was falling in love with Lucy Patterson, and her life would never be the same. 3 days later, Lucy found herself sitting in a makeup chair in New York City, staring at her reflection in a mirror surrounded by bright lights. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. The makeup artist had done something magical. Lucy's plain features now looked polished and camera-ready. "5 minutes until we're live," called out a young woman with a headset and clipboard. "Ms. Patterson, are you ready?" Lucy wasn't ready. She wasn't sure she'd ever be ready for something like this. Yesterday, she'd been organizing books in small-town Ohio. Now she was about to appear on Good Morning America, broadcast live to millions of people across the country. The video of her playing the broken piano had exploded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. In just 4 days, it had been viewed over 15 million times. The story had been picked up by major news networks, shared by celebrities, and discussed on talk shows. Lucy Patterson, the quiet librarian, had become the most talked-about person in America. "Remember what we discussed," said Jennifer Walsh, the producer who had flown out to Ohio to convince Lucy to come on the show. "Just be yourself. Tell your story. America has fallen in love with you already." Lucy nodded, trying to calm her nerves. The studio was enormous, nothing like she'd imagined from watching TV at home. Cameras moved on wheels. People rushed around with important-looking equipment. And everything was brighter and louder than real life. They led her onto the set, where the familiar Good Morning America hosts were waiting. Lucy had watched these people on television for years, and now she was sitting across from them like they were old friends. "Good Morning America," the host announced as the cameras rolled. "We have a very special guest with us today. By now you've probably seen the video that's captured the hearts of millions. A librarian from Ohio who sat down at a broken piano and created pure magic. Please welcome Lucy Patterson." The applause from the studio audience was overwhelming. Lucy managed a small wave, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment and excitement. "Lucy, first of all, thank you for being here," the host said with a warm smile. "Tell us, when you sat down at that piano last Saturday, did you have any idea what was about to happen?" "Not at all," Lucy said, surprised by how normal her voice sounded. "I just wanted to help out at the church fundraiser. They needed someone to play piano, and I thought maybe I could manage a simple hymn. But what you played was far from simple. We've had music professors contact our show, saying what you did requires extraordinary skill. Where did you learn to adapt music like that? Lucy took a deep breath. This was the part she'd been dreading, talking about her past, about dreams that never came true. I had piano lessons when I was little, she said. My parents worked very hard to pay for them. I loved music more than anything in the world. But when I was 10, my father got injured and couldn't work anymore. The lessons had to stop. The studio was completely quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to be listening intently. So you just stopped playing? The host asked gently. We had to sell our keyboard to help pay bills, Lucy continued. I didn't touch a piano for over 20 years. I thought that part of my life was over forever. But the talent never left. I guess not, Lucy said with a small smile. When I saw that broken piano, something inside me just woke up. All those songs were still there, waiting. The hosts asked more questions about her life, her work at the library, her dreams for the future. Lucy found herself relaxing, talking naturally about how music had shaped her childhood and how it felt to rediscover it as an adult. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Lucy, we have a surprise for you, the host said, gesturing toward the side of the stage. We'd like you to play something for us this morning. A beautiful grand piano was rolled onto the set. It was perfect. Gleaming black wood, pristine keys. The kind of instrument Lucy had dreamed about as a child but never thought she'd have the chance to play. This is a Steinway grand piano, the host explained. One of the finest instruments in the world. We thought after performing on a broken piano you might enjoy trying a perfect one. Lucy approached the piano with shaking hands. She'd never played anything this expensive or this beautiful. The bench was at exactly the right height. The keys responded to the slightest touch, and the sound that came out was richer and more resonant than anything she'd ever heard. She decided to play Clair de Lune by Debussy, one of her favorite pieces from childhood. As her fingers found the keys, the studio fell completely silent. The camera operators stopped moving. The production crew stood still. Even the bustling energy of live television seemed to pause. The music that filled the studio was breathtaking. After days of playing on broken keys, Lucy could hardly believe the sound she was making. Every note was clear and perfect, every phrase shaped exactly as she'd always imagined it should be. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. The host looked genuinely moved, and Lucy could see people in the studio audience wiping their eyes. Lucy Patterson, everyone, the host announced as they went to commercial break. During the break, one of the producers rushed over to Lucy. The phone hasn't stopped ringing, she said excitedly. Carnegie Hall wants to set up a formal concert. 3 record companies are competing to sign you. There's talk of a documentary about your story. Lucy felt dizzy again. A week ago, the most exciting thing in her life was the arrival of new books at the library. Now the most famous concert hall in America wanted to put her on their stage. After the show, Lucy's phone, a new smartphone the TV producers had helped her get, wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. The video of her Good Morning America performance was already being shared thousands of times. People were commenting, sharing their own stories about lost dreams and hidden talents. You've started something bigger than just music, Jennifer Walsh told her as they waited for Lucy's flight back to Ohio. People are talking about following their passions again, taking chances, not giving up on dreams just because life got in the way. On the plane home, Lucy scrolled through some of the messages people had sent her. A 60-year-old man had dusted off his guitar for the first time in 30 years. A mother of 3 had signed up for art classes she'd always wanted to take. Her retired teacher had started writing the novel she'd been thinking about for decades. You reminded me that it's never too late, one message read. Thank you for showing us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. As the plane descended toward Ohio, Lucy looked down at the familiar landscape of her home state. The same small towns, the same fields and forests. But somehow everything looked different now. She was still Lucy Patterson, the librarian from Millfield. But she was also something more now. Proof that talent doesn't disappear when life gets hard. That dreams can survive even when they're buried for decades. And that sometimes the most unexpected moments can change everything. Tomorrow she would have to decide what came next. Carnegie Hall was waiting. Record companies were calling. The whole world, it seemed, wanted to hear more of her music. But tonight, she was just going home to her small apartment. carrying with her the knowledge that she'd touched millions of hearts simply by being brave enough to sit down at a broken piano and let her gift shine. 2 months after that first video went viral, Lucy stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, looking out at the most famous concert stage in America. Through a gap in the heavy curtains, she could see nearly 3,000 people filling every seat in the magnificent hall. The golden walls and ornate ceiling seemed to glow under the stage lights. 5 minutes, Miss Patterson, whispered the stage manager. Lucy took a deep breath. Her hands weren't shaking anymore, not like they had been during those first television interviews. Over the past 8 weeks, she'd performed on morning shows, evening programs, and even played at the White House for a charity event. But this was different. This was Carnegie Hall. The ticket sales had broken records. The concert sold out in less than 10 minutes, with people paying thousands of dollars for single seats. The waiting list had over 50,000 names on it. They'd added a second performance the following night, and that sold out too. But Lucy wasn't thinking about the money or the fame. She was thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez, her childhood piano teacher, who was sitting in the third row tonight, about her parents who had sacrificed so much for her lessons and were now in the front row, crying before the concert had even begun, about Jimmy Walsh, the teenager who had filmed that first video, who was here with his family as special guests. Most of all, she was thinking about the broken piano that had started everything. That piano was here tonight too. Lucy had asked Carnegie Hall to bring it from the church in Ohio. It sat on one side of the stage next to the concert grand piano, still missing keys, still with some keys stuck down. The hall's technicians had wanted to fix it, but Lucy insisted they leave it exactly as it was. Ladies and gentlemen, came the announcement over the sound system. Please welcome Lucy Patterson. The applause hit her like a wave as she walked onto the stage. It went on for nearly 5 minutes with people standing, cheering, some wiping away tears before she'd even played a note. Lucy had to gesture for quiet several times before the hall finally settled. She walked first to the broken piano and sat on the familiar bench. The crowd held its breath. This is where it all started, Lucy said into the microphone. Her voice carried clearly through the perfect acoustics of the hall. 2 months ago, I was just trying to help out at a church fundraiser. I thought maybe I could play a simple song on this old piano that nobody wanted anymore. She placed her hands on the broken keys and began to play the same piece that had started everything. Amazing grace, but now, after months of practice and performing, her adaptation was even more beautiful than that first day. She'd learned to make the piano's flaws work like instruments in an orchestra, each broken key adding something unique to the melody. The hall was completely silent except for her music. Even though everyone had seen the original video hundreds of times, hearing it live in this perfect acoustic space was something entirely different. The broken piano's imperfect sound somehow seemed more moving than any perfect instrument could be. When she finished, the applause was gentle, respectful. People understood they were witnessing something special. Lucy then moved to the concert grand piano. But I've also learned that sometimes dreams get a second chance, she said. And when they do, you have to be ready to embrace something bigger than you ever imagined. She began to play a piece she'd written herself, something she'd been working on late at night in her apartment. She called it Broken Keys, and it told the story of her journey, the childhood dreams, the years of silence, the rediscovery, and the hope for what came next. The composition started quietly, almost hesitantly, like someone approaching a piano they hadn't touched in years. Then it grew stronger, more confident as the melody found its voice. There were sections that sounded like the broken piano, with missing notes and unexpected harmonies. But gradually, the music transformed into something complete and soaring, representing the perfect piano and the perfect moment when dreams and reality finally meet. As she played, Lucy thought about all the letters and messages she'd received over the past 2 months. Thousands of people had written to tell her how her story had changed their lives. A 70-year-old woman had returned to painting after 40 years. A man had quit his job to become a teacher like he'd always wanted. Parents were signing their children up for music lessons even when money was tight, because they'd seen what could happen when talent finds a way to shine. The Carnegie Hall audience was completely captivated. Some were recording on their phones, but most were simply listening, letting the music wash over them. In the third row, Mrs. Rodriguez was crying openly. remembering the little girl who had shown such promise all those years ago. Lucy finished the piece and sat quietly for a moment, her hands still on the keys. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before the applause began. But this wasn't just applause, it was something deeper. 3,000 people were on their feet, cheering not just for the performance but for the story it represented, for second chances and hidden talents and the courage to share your gifts with the world. The standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. Lucy had to take several bows before it finally began to quiet down. "Thank you," she said into the microphone, her voice thick with emotion. 2 months ago, I thought my life was already written. I was the quiet librarian who helped people find books and went home to her small apartment every night. I thought that was enough." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces in the audience. "But I learned that it's never too late to rewrite your story. It's never too late to let the world see who you really are. And sometimes the things that seem broken are exactly what the world needs to hear." Lucy played 3 more pieces that night, classical works she'd loved as a child, adapted now with the wisdom and experience of her adult years. Each performance was met with thunderous applause. But the real magic happened after the concert. As people filed out of Carnegie Hall, they weren't just talking about Lucy's technique or her musical interpretation. They were talking about their own dreams, their own hidden talents, the things they'd given up that maybe they could try again. Outside the hall, Jimmy Walsh was being interviewed by a news crew. "I just thought it would be cool to post a video," he said. "I had no idea it would change someone's life like this." Lucy's parents stood nearby, still in shock at seeing their daughter perform at the most famous concert hall in the world. "She used to play for us in the living room when she was little," her mother told a reporter. "Even then we knew she had something special. We just never imagined it would take 30 years for the world to discover it too." 6 months later, Lucy released her first album. Half the tracks were recorded on the broken piano from the church, and half on concert grand pianos in the world's finest recording studios. The album went to #1 and stayed there for 12 weeks, but Lucy still lived in Millfield, Ohio. She still worked part-time at the library, though now she also traveled the world giving concerts. She'd started a foundation that provided music lessons for children whose families couldn't afford them, making sure no child would have to give up their dreams the way she once did. The broken piano became part of her regular performances. She took it with her on tour, showing audiences everywhere that beauty could come from imperfection, that limitations could become opportunities, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things happened when you were brave enough to try. Lucy Patterson had become America's reminder that it's never too late to let your light shine.